Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and Zero One. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to freedom. Dance tonight together. Here everybody's singing.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for November 28th, 2023. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated podcast feed on all podcast catchers and applications. You can follow us on Twitter X at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box that says sponsor this podcast. And you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts, your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, Case Lowe. And Case, how was your Thanksgiving?
Oh my goodness, it was lovely. I am in a family where we go out to restaurants on Thanksgiving. No cooking for us. It's very nice, very stress-free. You show up, you pay money, you eat food. We go to a nice restaurant. Nobody's arguing in the kitchen. There's no cleanup. Whole thing is great. Very, very nice weekend with my family, and then a nice weekend with my girlfriend and her mom. So just a good time all around. What about you, Mike?
You know, I got to get out of Texas for a couple days, go visit the folks down in South Florida, which, you know, November weather in South Florida, that is thriving right there, where it's just 65 degrees, eating outside every day. And it's just was an absolute delight. Actually, me and my partner getting to go down there, spending some time with my family was really nice. And then the one thing, like, going there and back is just, I feel like that I sound sick, even though I'm absolutely not, just because of all the time on airplanes. Like, you would think during COVID, we would figure out a way to get, like, the airplane air to get a lot better when we came back into it. No, not whatsoever.
Mike, we learned nothing from COVID.
I mean,
nothing. I don't know if anything got better.
Yeah. It's something where, especially like as like we've talked about this a couple times on the show, getting stuff together, 2024 at least for like the two of us with like Dragongate content is a big year for us. So I'm getting stuff together from that. I'm thinking about the last time we kind of had a project like this, and the Rewind and Rewatch project done in COVID, and I was like, wow, that was 2 years ago, like 2.5 years ago, but in a lot of ways it feels like a decade, and it also feels like yesterday.
I was talking to somebody, that's really funny you say that. I was talking to somebody this afternoon about, first of all, how much I enjoyed COVID unemployment checks, because when COVID hit, I moved back in with my parents. I was paying no rent. I had no expenses, and I was simultaneously making more money than I had ever made before. And it was awesome. And it really helped me out in 2021 and 2022 when I was making no money. And even though I was just working in a job that didn't pay me much at all. So I was living off of those unemployment checks, and those kicked ass. But also, I mean, you and I talk about this all the time. The stuff we could do for this podcast, if we, like I always say, I just want 28 hours in the day. If I just had a little bit more time, I could do so much more. And COVID was great because I was like, oh, I have nothing going on. Let me go ahead and rewatch every Dragongate USA show. That seems like a really good use of my time, actually. And as we plot out some stuff for this upcoming year, I have to be on it. I have stuff I want to do and not a lot of time to do it, which is a bummer. But the stuff that's going to get done is exciting. I just laid the groundwork for something that will hopefully be out in the first quarter of next year that I'm really, really excited about. It could end up being one of the cooler things I've done in terms of Dragongate content. So hopefully that works out.
Yeah, the thing that really gets me about it is, of course, next year is the 25th anniversary or 25th anniversary of the Toryumon landing is January 31st. And I'm just like, oh, that's 60 days. And I have to get certain things done before that day. And
yeah,
and that's what it really kind of is where I'm at right now with that. But that is something that's still 60 days, case. We still got some time on it. That we've been away for the holiday, but we are back now talking about this real interesting end of November in Dragongate. But before we do that this week, Case, while we were gone, the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame announced its 2023 class. We talked when the ballot was introduced on the show about Dragon System participants, just our general kind of ethos towards this. Case is a voter. I was not a voter, just our own kind of thoughts about it. But now we have the inductees, and yet again, no Dragon System.
Nope.
It's getting... I thought this year might have been Shingo's year.
Well, I think, and I'm counting the Young Bucks in this conversation. I have a lot to say about the Young Bucks, and we'll tie it into the fact that they worked Dragongate to stay loosely on topic. But, you know, the Bucks, unless people are dumber than I thought they were, the Bucks will get in next year. And I do think there's upward momentum for Shingo. I think we're very close to approaching a reality in which Shingo is a Hall of Famer. The concerning thing is Shima's 11% drop off year over year. I don't know what to do about that. I'm a little stunned by the results, and I get it. You know, the beauty pair deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm glad they got in because I think the reaction of the beauty pair not getting in would have been really annoying because they're no doubters. But, you know, like I said, from the time the voting process started, they deserve to be in. I can only vote for 3 people, though, and I really want to make sure that I vote for Shima, Shingo, and Ishii. Ishii gets in, Shingo rises huge, Shima drops pretty big. The 3 candidates that are Dragon System related that were on the ballot this year, Bucks, Shima, and Shingo. I want to talk about all of them, but which do you want to start with?
I think Shingo's kind of the easiest one. When you look at how the voting rules changed in the 3 votes in Japan, it really seemed like that there were 4 or 5 viable candidates, and with the beauty pair needing that was a correction that needed to happen. Like that was something that I really wish that Dave would have just said, like, you know what, guys, I biffed it. I should have had Ueda in to begin with and just not have them on the ballot and just let people move on and save that vote. But with that, you probably had 4 or 5 viable candidates, and with Ishii and the beauty pair taken out of it, that I would think that would make Shingo Takagi the strongest candidate going forward in Japan.
Yeah, I thought what Dave said in his write-up was really interesting. He said, and I quote, Shingo Takagi should be in for all of the reasons that Ishii is in. Plus, he has been IWGP champion and Open the Dreamgate champion. If you argue Ishii is the better wrestler, you can, but you're splitting hairs. But among the top today, but both are among the top today and have been for a decade. Takagi even longer. There's a strong sentiment that Takagi is the stronger candidate because of what Ishii lacked as far as headlining the biggest shows and holding world titles. Takagi did that. Takagi held the IWGP title, had one of the best series of matches of all time with Will Ospreay, was Japan MVP, Tokyo Sports MVP, and most outstanding wrestler all in 2021. In Dragongate, he was a 4-time Dreamgate champion, 5-time tag team champion, and 6-time trios champion. His match reviews from all key sources placed him top 10, and these are pretty comprehensive for the last 30 years, end quote. So I think Dave is even on board with voting for Shingo in the future, and perhaps a passage like that would have held more weight 15 years ago when It wasn't as easy to consume Dave through short form and rather long form analysis. Now, I don't know how many people open the Observer and are even reading that sort of stuff, but it seems like even Dave is saying like, well, if you guys are going to rally around Ishii next year, let's put that weight into Shingo.
Yeah, and given what the electorate is, I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to convince. I feel like and I feel like this is a kind of a good time to shift over to CIMA. It is something where I feel like we're kind of, unless there's a great reassessment of what Lucha Rest means to pro wrestling, which I guess that's really a war we have to lead. But unless that happens, I think it's just something where this electorate is just not going to give it his case, at least the way I look at it, the proper judgment. And I think that's also something that for a lot of this one territory and the Observer is going to have some. I don't want to call it like a reality perception gap, but I feel like that what the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame will say about Japanese wrestling of this era, when we look back at it, I don't feel like it's going to be a complete accurate portrayal without someone like CIMA in it. But it seems like that's kind of the reality we're coming.
And it's a bummer because, part of my whole thing these last 2 years with voting for Naito and Ibushi and Ishii is like, look, these were 3 central figures in the most profitable Japanese wrestling period ever for one specific company, and the greatest in-ring period ever for any specific company. Like they were the zenith, they were the absolute peak. So those guys deserve to be represented in a Hall of Fame like this. And if you look at the Japanese landscape over the last 20 years, the guys that have gotten in are the contemporary New Japan guys. And I'm not losing sleep over, Katsuhiko Nakajima not being on the ballot, over Kenta not being on the ballot, even if I might vote for Kenta personally. The whole here, like you said, is that there's no one from the second biggest promotion in Japan, a financial success, a promotion that had this tremendous Cork and Hall sellout streak. They've had big shows. They've influenced wrestling. CIMA's, to me, one of the 30 greatest wrestlers to ever live. And I thought it was interesting that Dave noted in his analysis, nobody has gotten in off of what they've done. And he highlighted ECW, ROH, and Dragongate as the 3 promotions that no one from the Hall of Fame is in because of the work they've done in those promotions alone. And I think in a way they're all very similar. They've all been these, very influential, very critically acclaimed promotions. The difference is that if CIMA was in ECW, he would have been in 5 years ago when he was on the ballot. If he had the career he had in ROH, I think he would be in by now, but he's in Dragongate, and it's not getting forget the love, it's not getting the respect that he deserves. And for me, it's frustrating on a personal level. He fell 11%, I believe it was. He was at 34% last year. He's at 23% this year. He fell 11%. And I don't know how else to sell CIMA in another way from what I did on Rich and Joe's podcast on the flagship Patreon, because I felt like that was the most in-depth CIMA Hall of Fame audio there's been. I felt like I did a really good job of explaining. Like everybody goes, oh, well, he was the ace of Dragongate, but I don't think a lot of people understood what that meant. And I really just tried to walk people through that and explain his business acumen and explain his influence, and then some in-ring stuff with him that I feel gets overlooked. And I would have been, I would have been thrilled had he just been flat, but for him to drop off like that is upsetting. Now, maybe next year, with the guys that are added to the ballot, I don't think any of those guys are getting in or will be any serious candidates. So maybe we see a rise in CIMA again. But yeah, it's very frustrating at this point.
And it's something where I wrote a piece for Jesse Cowling's Make the Case about CIMA's candidacy, and there's an aspect to his candidacy that I think that even if you are someone who primarily just watches major U.S. wrestling, you can't, if you're not familiar with CIMA, you look at the wrestlers that he was the scout for, and he was the primary talent development person for, and you compare and contrast that to what other talent development has done over the last 25 to 30 years, and in some ways he's peerless in that regard. And I think that that's something also that, yes, it's the 3 categories and positive, going positive towards wrestling, however Dave wants to phrase it there, is hit and miss at times in how you choose to interpret it. But I feel like that when you look at Monday Night Raw and AEW Dynamite and you see what's happening up and down the card, you kind of have to, and you want to attribute to one person, you kind of have to give that to CIMA.
Yeah, he might be the single most influential wrestling figure of the 21st century. I think the Young Bucks might be the guy that beat him, and the Bucks have their career because of CIMA. He's just a slam dunk candidate. I explained why I think is a better candidate than Hayabusa, who I think is a good candidate. He is such a far superior candidate to somebody like Fujiwara. And I'm very glad that people pointed out this year that shoot style is arguably overrepresented in this Hall of Fame. Lucharesu has no representation outside of Ultimo, and shoot style is just stuffed to the gills. I mean, I'm obsessing over the fact that Kazushi Sakuraba had 70% of the vote when he got into the Hall of Fame. That just seems absolutely insane when you look at it now. It's just one of those deals where, again, if CIMA was a New Japan guy, if he was an All Japan guy, if he was a Noah guy, people like Fumi and these old school Japanese heads would be frothing at the mouth for a candidate like this. But he works in Dragongate, and they've never gotten the respect they deserve from their own media, let alone the English-speaking media. And we see it happen now. 23% for CIMA is, I think, a very bad look for the voting base.
Yeah, and something that I thought was a bad look for the voting base. Should we talk about Young Bucks?
I would love to. I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, I am just going to hand the ball over to you, buddy. The Young Bucks not inducted this year.
55.1% of the vote. For those that don't know, you need 60% to get in. 3rd with reporters, 15th with historians. I should note that Roman Reigns was 8th with historians, 13th with active wrestlers, and they did not rank with retired wrestlers who had their voting process. Randy Orton was number 1, and Roman Reigns was number 4 for retired wrestlers. And I think it's appalling that the greatest working tag team of all time, who might be, if not CIMA, the most influential wrestlers of the 21st century and legitimate business successes, business stars, drawing stars, they couldn't do more to get in the Hall of Fame. And to think that they got 55% of the vote is, I find it to be embarrassing. And, I said on Twitter the day that the voting came out, it's embarrassing that the greatest tag team of all time didn't get in the Hall of Fame on their first ballot. And, you start saying, but Beer Money not get in? The Motor City Machine Guns not get in? And look, I say this knowing full well Alex Shelley might hear this. Sorry to out him, but man's listened to the podcast before. There's no argument in which anybody, unless it's Kawada and Taue, there's no argument that any other team is better than what the Young Bucks have done. The Motor City Machine Guns' best matches are against the Young Bucks, and the Bucks worked for 15 years longer at a higher level than them. We can't do these joke responses to something when something like this, where I care about the Hall of Fame, and I get some people don't, but I think it matters. I think it's important. I like being a part of the process. For them not to get in first time around, mainly because of retired wrestlers, I'm appalled by it. I can't believe, even if they were close, that they didn't get in.
I just love the fact that, of course, retired wrestlers, Randy Orton's the pick.
Oh, God.
Like that's the mentality right there when it comes down to it. And it's something, at least for me, that when I look at the other wrestling Hall of Fames, like you have Waterloo and you have, I'm trying to remember what's the one that's what they call the one up in upstate New York.
Not the Cauliflower Alley Club.
No. It's just like the actual physical locations for Hall of Fames. Like they gear towards certain things. The WWE Hall of Fame is a media prop, and this is one that actually, for a while, is like the one you could look at as like the most clear and fair one. I would say, like, the one thing about the one up in Waterloo, Iowa, that is that that's a focus towards wrestlers who more often than not had an amateur background and something like that. Whereas this one, I feel like gets more of a wild breath. And then when you're not acknowledging reality, it is something that, like CIMA, it kind of calls it into question, at least when you're able to just basically defenestrate it by saying, the Young Bucks are the greatest working tag team of all time. Why aren't they in them the first time they launched the company? They launched basically two companies. If you want to think about Ring of Honor in 2012 to where it was before, it just becomes ridiculous at that point.
I mean, I think there's a large percentage of wrestling fans out there, some of whom I are not like mouth breathers. Like, there's intelligent wrestling fans out there that I don't think realize, even if you and I don't like what AEW is becoming, the undoubted business success that is AEW. And it's spearheaded in part by the Bucks.
Yeah, and it's something where, the fortunes of AEW feels completely different as we are entering December 2023 versus where it was in 2021, but they're still going to get another contract. It's still going to be a company that is the most viable number 2 in a more than a generation, and that's on their backs. And in any other case where they've built up that kind of competition, those candidates get in the Hall of Fame.
I'm blown away by it, and it really got me thinking as, we record this 24 hours removed from CM Punk's Dead Behind the Eyes, I'm not here to make friends, I'm just here to get paid promo. And, I not new for any, returning listeners of the show, just how disgusted I get by the glad-handed media that is, just ready to eat up whatever WWE offers. I'm constantly amazed at how the Elite completely and utterly broke people's brains in a way that I don't know if we totally analyzed correctly. And I tweeted this out when Punk returned, but like, the amount of people that were like, oh, finally he's come home. Like, this great wrestling mind can now be himself in World Wrestling Entertainment. The fact that the Elite have forced people to incorrectly rewrite history to where the WWE is this beacon of pro wrestling history and tradition is something that I can't stop thinking about. And it to me, it's like a great influence of the Bucks. It's like they actually brought forth what, for 4 years, forget maybe the last 6 months, but for 4 years was this relevant and interesting mainstream American wrestling promotion. Again, in part by the Young Bucks. And now, like, they're looked at. I can't believe the public perception of these guys sometimes. And especially when you compare it to, like, oh, well, Vince did it the right way. Like, Vince is a real wrestling promoter. Tony Khan, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, holy shit, we've completely lost the plot on how we got here. Like, history is just either misremembered, misinterpreted, or has been completely rewritten in a way that doesn't reflect reality at all. And I'm just blown away by the entire thing. And the mix of the retired wrestlers, completely shunning the Bucks from their ballot, and then, the CM Punk stuff over the weekend, it's greatly upsetting to me.
I think, like, the thing that kind of got me about the Punk stuff, and, like, there's a little bit of, like, I feel like that it was not just that, like, the Elite, like, broke people's brains. It is something that when you, like, added in an emotional presence, like Punk returning and then now going back to WWE and how manufactured it kind of was, like it's manufactured at the end of the day. And I just kind of sit back and I kind of, like, start laughing at it. It's like, oh, everyone kind of forgets that Vince was handed his territory by his dad.
Oh, and no, nobody is in. No one knows that. Like, I don't want to say no one knows that. It's just, it doesn't matter to people. The whole thing just blows my mind.
Well, it's manufacturing history. It's the end of wrestling. I mean, we have reached this point where I don't know if it's necessarily. I like this comp, and I've used it before, but we've reached this point where AEW, in imitating WWE, has shown that WWE's model of just completely going business to business and premium live events, and the most valuable thing is not the fan. The most valuable thing is the business thing. That's the actual stakeholder there, has kind of been proven as the like the final form of wrestling promoting. Like, where can it go from here? And while all this is happening, everyone's brain's broken about CM Punk.
What did you think about that promo?
Oh gosh. Well, first off, you know I don't touch the poop, but
No, and by the way, if you sat down and watched 3 hours of Raw, do better. Come on, guys. Come on.
So I think that, like I said on Twitter X earlier, that what were people expecting at the end of the day? Like everyone's like, oh, he's gonna go in spicy. It's like, did y'all not notice where Tony Khan said, "I'm not sidestepping this. I just legally cannot talk about this." If Tony Khan cannot legally talk about that situation, then where in the hell can CM Punk talk about it legally? So there was that. And then the thing that gets me about Punk is that when he has decided to adopt the hockey persona that like he aggressively did after the pipe bomb promo, where it wasn't necessarily something he really ever talked about before 2011, and going in and talking it, the way he said the word barn just drives me insane. Like it is something where like he was so proud of himself for saying it that way. And I was just like, what are you? What are you, man?
I'm blown away by the entire thing. 3 years ago, I would talk on this podcast and, shows I did with Alan Forel, and just, whenever I had the chance to talk about Punk, about how wrestling was better with him in it than without him. And, when he came back, I was at the United Center the night he came back, and I've never been in a louder building before. And I've been to some things. I've been to some cool things. I've never heard the noises I heard when Punk returned to wrestling and through Brawl Out. It was fucking awesome. And it was like, this guy's cool. I'm glad that he's back. I love his mind. And it has never been the same post Brawl Out. And, when he came back, it wasn't the same, but I was still like, well, it's Punk, and I like what they're doing on Collision, and all right, like I'm gonna ride this until the wheels fall off. And then the wheels fell off, and then, I see this guy come out on YouTube, of course, not watching live, could not be suckered into that, but I see this guy come out, somebody who was my childhood idol. I'm straight edge because I watched a CM Punk documentary when I was 13, and I was like, well, that's cool. And 10 years later, here I am. It's still greatly impacting my life. And I watched a guy who was so uncool cut that promo, and it just blew my mind. I was so startled by it, and it's so sad to think, to tie it all the way home. Like, sometimes I get really bummed out when I see CIMA wrestle in front of a really small crowd, because even if, CIMA, much like CM Punk, is not exactly an upstanding citizen, and, this is probably karma coming back to get him in one way or another, it's a real shame to see CIMA's career putter out the way that it has. And to think that this is probably the last thing that Punk will ever be involved with, and it'll fizzle. It'll either fizzle, or he'll become a mid-carder that's irrelevant. And I don't know which is sadder, but both are sad, and it's just so numbing to think about.
Yeah, it's something where it became very clear with me at Brawl Out that Wrestling Society passed by this guy. And it's not just like a negative towards him. It's just like, I have friends who know that my favorite wrestler is Akira Tozawa. Like, I'm pretty open about that case. You've known about that pretty much ever since we've done the show.
Yeah.
And their favorite thing to do is to drop clips of him doing Alpha Academy Pringle spots and like the commercial stuff like this. And it's something where, like, for Akira Tozawa, given how everything's happened with WWE and how that system is, he's got himself made. It's something that it bums me out on an existential level, but it's something that it's like a fun little jab to do that to me, to drop those clips at it. Imagine CM Punk backstage and those sorts of things, because that's where the puttering out gets real depressing.
Oh my God. It's just terrible. It's a bummer. I get so annoyed by the like I know people in my own life that are fired up about this. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe he's back. And it's just like, what's he gonna do? Wrestle Seth Rollins? I don't give a shit. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Seth Rollins wrestle ever.
Yeah. I guess like the thing about like the thing that really gets me down about more of it is just like, I have reached a certain point where I just don't want to have an opinion about CM Punk anymore.
I felt that way for a while, and then like during Brawl Out discourse, I was like, all right, I've had enough of this. But I liked seeing the guy wrestle because I always thought he was interesting. I think the MJF stuff he did, it was just phenomenal. Like, that's what I want out of wrestling. I want that, and I want cool trios matches. And, you know, he's not going to do that here. You know, it's just his career's going to suck until the end, and it's just such a bummer.
Well, Case, you know where we can talk about some cool trios matches?
Well, can I say one more thing on the Hall of Fame real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry. So people know that are either voting or not. So Shima and Shingo will remain on the ballot. The people getting added to Japan next year are Asuka/Kana, Kento Miyahara, which is so dumb. Miyahara is in the midst of a really interesting run of his career. There's no one should be forced to vote or not vote for him for another 5 years. But it's Asuka, Kento Miyahara, Yoshihiro Takayama, Zack Sabre Jr., and Kochi Yoshizawa, who was a Japanese historian. Any thoughts briefly on those names that are getting added to the Japanese section?
I am livid that Zack Sabre Jr. is getting added when Masaki Mochizuki has never been on a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Zack's another one. Like, why am I don't want to think about Zack right now. I want to think about Zack in 10 years, because I think there's interesting stuff there with him, but not now. I really wish Dave would raise the voting age to 40 and not 35. I think that would help things. So those are the guys from Japan. I don't know. I don't envision voting for anybody. I love Takayama. I'll take a look at him, but I think he's a Hall of very good guy.
The historian is someone that I think will do surprisingly well. Because I know of who that is. If it is who I think it is, like, I apologize, not.
No, it's Dave's old friend. He passed away either earlier this year or late last year.
But he was basically responsible for almost all Japanese wrestling coverage in North America, because he would just send stuff like just out of the goodness of everything that's wanting it to be covered. I don't know if he was really the trader, but I know he was the photographer that would always get stuff out to both Dave and then also to PWI and stuff like that. And I feel like that he might do surprisingly well because of that.
The thing I want to bring up here in terms of the Hall of Fame is that Gran Hamada is back on the ballot. He is not in the Japan section. He is in the Mexico section, which makes my life a little bit more difficult, although I think it might actually make Hamada's life easier. I could see that.
I think so.
Yeah, I think everybody, I didn't see a lot of people say that. I think they were bummed out that he was in Mexico, and I was like, I don't know. It might actually be better for him. So we have a year to talk about this. We don't need to do a lot of Hamada stuff right now because there's a lot of Dragongate stuff to talk about. But just off the top, Mike, and this is how I think about the Hall of Fame sometimes. This is legitimately, honestly, how I think about the Hall of Fame. If you had to describe to Jim Ross who Gran Hamada was and why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, how would you do that?
Fuck. Okay.
This is honestly, like, when I'm talking about Shima in the Hall of Fame, more often than not, I am framing it as, how could I get Jim Ross to care?
Yeah, no, that's the right way to think about it. And that does, like, oh gosh, like this is something like where like people or like friends and family like think that like when I do like wrestling coverage, they think it's like sumo wrestling. Like it's like this is not too far down that road. So Gran Hamada should be in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, JR, because when you look at how wrestling has evolved and bringing facets of wrestling across the world, with the exception of Mil Mascaras, there's probably no one who's been as influential about bringing Lucha Libre into Japan, and by process of what he created in Japan, essentially launched an entire branch of wrestling, just like Fujiwara and Shoot Style.
I think that's very fair. You know, the thing with Hamada is I think he would be very close to getting in on Work Alone. I think he could get in on Influence Alone. And then you realize that he actually has this incredible drawing record in Mexico in the 70s and 80s. And you go, oh, okay, so he's kind of a slam dunk in all three categories. Maybe not a Hall of Fame draw, maybe just not quite a Hall of Famer on in-ring alone. But you factor in the influence, which is, it cannot be overstated. I mean, Hamada would do things in like 1984 that would be seen as progressive today as a wrestler. You know, he was an ambitious promoter who is, you know, really responsible for bringing lucha culture, not luchadors, but lucha culture to Japan. And that led the way for Michinoku Pro and then Osaka Pro and Toryumon and Dragongate. And here we are today talking about this on the podcast. But he is going to be, I think, the strongest candidate on the ballot other than maybe Shingo next year and the Bucks. I would say if you've never seen Hamada or want to know more about him, I'll throw two things your way. One, you can go on YouTube right now. There is a 2 out of 3 falls Gran Hamada match. It's Gran Hamada versus Perro Aguayo from 1990. I would start there and just focus on the fact that that match existed in 1990 and how far ahead of the rest of the wrestling world that match was. That is your chapter 1 introduction for Hamada. And then for anybody listening, like, I plan on doing a lot of Hamada stuff next Hall of Fame season. Even if I don't vote in Mexico, I'm not sure I'm going to yet. But if there's like specific things where you go, what about this with Hamada? What about that? Match recommendations, influence, whatever. Please let me know. I'd be more than happy to tackle specific questions people have, because Hamada should have been in a decade ago, and I'm very glad Dave put him back on the ballot.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, at least for me, 2 years ago when we were doing the GWE with Alan and all of that, really exposing myself and getting in deep with Gran Hamada was the walking away from that. It became very clear that Gran Hamada was not just a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame or a Hall of Fame level wrestling personality. He quite possibly is one of the 20 greatest wrestlers of all time.
Very much so.
And it's something that we should do like a special Gran Hamada show sometime next year. Just talking about
trust
that.
me, I am all for it.
Should we talk about these last few weeks in Dragongate finally?
Yeah, because it was a great week in Dragongate too.
Yeah, so Dragongate over a time off, basically, they had a one network show. This was in Kunamoto, Genki Horiguchi's 20th anniversary exciting battle, and then a lot of just general house show loops. They had their October trip to Okinawa. This time it was not on the network. The show they did with Ryukyu Dragon Wrestling, Pro Wrestling, is on the Ryukyu Dragon YouTube channel, I think. I think they did their live stream of that, but we had a YouTube upload for that this time. Instead, we had a remainder of a loop really around that western part of Japan, including a Kaito Nagano return and homecoming. But the most prominent thing, I believe, is Genki Horiguchi's 23rd anniversary show in his hometown of Kunamoto at Kunamoto-jo Hall. 551 fans. Before we get into this show, or just our big takeaways from it, Case, what were your thoughts about this anniversary exciting battle series for Genki, finalizing in a network show from Kunamoto in a very loud venue? Like, Kunamoto was hot that night.
Yeah, I think so. On the Dragongate website, when you look at attendance, it'll say like super no vacancy, full house, or full house. I think this one said in parentheses very full, which I just like. I just like thinking about attendance. I was like, it's pretty full in there. This show is about 2 hours in length. You should watch this as a 2-hour wrestling TV show. It was phenomenal from start to finish. No matches that I'd put in my notebook, but just from opening bell to closing, what a fun show with a red hot sort of pre-pandemic sounding crowd. I love this.
Yeah, and it was something, at least. So Dragongate had their previous only other network show was in Cork and Hall, with the uniting of Big Hug, but we kind of had a little bit enough of a break where we could step away and see where things were going. And I feel like going into this last month of the year, everything feels a lot, at least if Kunamoto is any indication. And of course, this is Genki's hometown. There was a lot of new things happening on this show and happening on this tour. But it was something where I had one match I went notebook on, Case, and nothing on that show is below a solid 3 and 2 hours that were just it flew by, and leading to the just incredibly fun M2K versus almost Do Fixer main event with Genki Horiguchi in his hometown, teaming with Dragon Kid and Ryo Saito versus Masaki Mochizuki, Susumu Mochizuki, and Zushi Kanda. Just fun stuff all throughout.
Yeah, that's a great match to highlight up top, because I don't have extended thoughts on any of those guys. We'll talk about Mochi towards the end of the podcast, but for all of the all of the YouTube uploads and then this show, these guys were largely contained to just this match. And it's one of those deals where, I'd probably give it 3.5 stars, but it's not. This is one of those matches where that doesn't matter. If you've ever had love for Dragongate, whether it's contemporary, whether it was 5 years ago, whether it was 10 years ago, whether it was 20 years ago, there was just something so right about this match. And it's one of these things that Dragongate just does better than other promotions. New Japan will recognize anniversaries. They'll celebrate these sort of things, but they don't celebrate it quite like this. And this is just where Dragongate seems to know their core audience and hammer home, everything matters. Your fandom matters. Thank you for being here. Here's just a treat. Here's just a match for the boys. And it was such a damn good time.
Yeah, it was something also where in this venue, since it was a network show, it was a hard cam, and the hard cam was on the stage where they were entering. And with the way that it was laid out, where we could see locker room sellouts during the show, and there was a lot of it during this match. And for me, at least during like these shows, and especially like YouTube uploads, these are the matches that I really walk away with having like the warm feelings about. And more so than anything else, seeing Genki Horiguchi in his hometown with his big anniversary match happening, and just seeing someone not only just like do it for the boys, but just be able to kind of be an ego monster and just get the crowd to do whatever he wants because he's so over. That's one of my favorite things in wrestling, case, is when someone has such control of an audience that they are just taking them on the ride. That's what this match was. It was Genki Horiguchi deciding to take everyone on the ride.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen this version of Genki, because you can look at his career through like, there's the Do Fixer era where he's a great wrestler and he's a great mind, but he's also, he's super athletic, he's super quick, he's this, that, the other thing. Into the 2010s through maybe 2016, like, okay, Genki is a great wrestler, but he's a better mind, but both are there. It's, a lot of times I think that's the peak of Genki. And then you have the last like 5 years or so where his body's not there, and he broke down hard and fast, but his mind is there. So every once in a while, Genki can suck you into a match because he's Genki Horiguchi and he's forever underappreciated. And we haven't seen it in a while, but this was one of those matches where it's just like, God, this guy, look, he has the advantage of working in front of his hometown crowd, but not everybody can pull out reactions like that. He is just such a special wrestler. I was thrilled, just to plug it one more time. If you go to my Twitter @_InYourCase on voicesofwrestling.com this year, I talked to Genki about 20 years removed from El Numero Uno 2003, which was his big coming out party. And, it made the backslide from heaven, which you still see relevant in a match like this. And God, he's forever underappreciated. What a genius wrestler. And I love seeing stuff like this, like you said, where it's like, his body's not there. He's moving he's moving half as fast as he was 5 years ago. And he was already slowing down at that point, but that didn't stop him from being just this completely insane, charismatic, magnetic performer in a match like this.
Yeah, and it's something where, like, I remember Stalker's homecoming match earlier this year, where like you get to see a little aspect of that, but when you kind of get to see something here where, at least for me, Case, I remember for years pulling up iHeart DG and reading about these Kunamoto shows and reading about like, oh, Genki's homecoming is such a big deal, and being able like to see this like momentous one, and this being the match the way it is with the 5 guys that it had to be these 5 guys in this match. I mean, you have Maraha Asapa as well as a Do Fixer sort of thing happening with it. Dragon Kid has a cool half Hayabusa, half Dragon Kid mask on against M2K. Like it's how it had to be. And it was something that, at least for Kunamoto, sending the crowd home with that after the show that they had, it just felt like the appropriate thing. Elsewhere, what else on the card would you want to talk about next?
Let's go top to bottom. Let's start with the opener and just sort of go from there. And if I have thoughts on guys, what we're gonna do here is we're going to use the basis of the Kumamoto show to talk about the weeks these guys had, because there was what, 5 or 6 YouTube uploads this week. It'll be all encompassing. So when there's names that I want to bring up, we will hit on those names, but we'll do it through the order of this show.
Yeah, they had 6 shows in 6 nights.
Yeah,
it was something where now they got a couple days off before they're about to go to their Sapporo swing and then straight into a Korakuen. So
do you want to talk about real quick? And I present this topic to you unexpected. You can choose to decline, and I promise everybody listening, I am bringing this up in the most agnostic way possible. I don't mean any harm. I am just simply pointing this out because it's something that I saw Mike talking about earlier today. Do you want to talk about the Dragongate schedule in comparison to the Stardom schedule real quick, and just the issues that Stardom is facing? And again, I'm not doing this to be a dick. I think Stardom's in a really interesting position right now. But I understand that some people might think I'm being disingenuous or being a dick because I bring this up. I'm not. I just thought Mike offered really interesting insight into this earlier today when we were talking about it with somebody else.
Yeah, so Dragongate, a part of this episode and why we're doing this kind of in this format, it's almost like a wrestler buffet edition of this, is because over the holiday, Dragongate, they did their Okinawa swing the week before, but then they were on the road from the 21st until the 26th. As we've talked about a lot on the show, and just in case people don't really comprehend this, Dragongate, with the exception of CMLL, who has 5 or 6 different venues, Cubs will let me know how many actually they have, but they 6 venues that they own that are running their shows 4 or 5 nights of a week. Outside of CMLL and WWE, who has 2 or 3 different tours operating at one time, different brands, Dragongate runs more wrestling than anyone else in the world. And it's been that way essentially since 1999. When Alan Forel talked about Susumu never missing a month of wrestling and posted his cage match page, you essentially got to see how much you work if you were a Dragongate wrestler. And that comes in kind of as a contrast to Stardom, who Stardom has had this huge injury issue that's popped up this fall, starting during the 5-Star Grand Prix. I'm trying to see where someone had the full list of all the injuries, but essentially the whole entire, like, half of the promotion has been on the injury list off and on since the summer. And part of that is because that the Stardom model has drastically changed under Bushiroad ownership, and part of that is massively long tournaments. The 5-Star Grand Prix 2023, which was nicely done in 3 months of this year, but also the fact that they do a lot of one-off pay-per-views. And I'm trying to see the exact tweet from someone that they translated this, though there was an investigation about these injuries, guys. And let's see if this tweet is still up about this, where the new president of Stardom is that Stardom is moving to 1 pay-per-view a month and restructuring the schedule to reduce chances of injury for the wrestlers, including a Wrestlers Association and Union that will basically be the wrestler's voice. Kind of like that sort of stuff. But the overall thing that you hear is that Stardom is running way too much. And it's not necessarily the case. Stardom still is running less than Dragongate, running less than a lot of other promotions. But it is something where it does seem that it is mostly the idea of there's no like shows off in the manner of you have to go hard basically from a tournament into this pay-per-view back to the tournament, and not getting like the 6-man tag where Shun Skywalker does nothing and takes like 3 bumps but just brawls and is awesome. Those don't really happen in Stardom, it appears.
No, I do think that's an interesting point, though, because we're now essentially at 2 full years of getting these YouTube digests. And I would say my public perception of Dragongate, and I talked about this last year, I think it was SFM 50, we were talking about Shun Skywalker because somebody really disagreed with the placement of Skywalker. And something that one of the voters brought up was like, yeah, but look at how hard he works on some of these Dragongate house shows. I think before we were getting these digests, like, there was a perception that no one's doing anything. These Dragongate house shows are just aggressive nights off. And now we see that, you know, they certainly cycle in guys that are are not trying as hard on these shows, but I mean, there's still some full-on 100% level Dragongate matches on these house shows, and it's just very, to me, the perception of what a Dragongate house show is has drastically changed over the last 2 years.
Yeah, and it's changed in a way where now I get excited when I see on a house show, okay, Shun Skywalker's gonna have a match with Ryo Tanaka.
Yeah,
because
buckle up, baby.
Buckle up, and we'll be talking about that in a couple minutes. But I think so. Stardom over the last 3 years, I pulled this up here. I'm just trying to get it pulled up. Went from 101 shows in 2021 under COVID restrictions, 118 shows in 2022. Again, mostly under restrictions, but restrictions were loosening. And then to date this year, 129 shows. That's not, well, when you look at that, you're talking about escalation, that's not necessarily a big escalation as if you think about they're running so much more. It does seem to be that it's just how they are structuring these things to me, more so than anything else. But especially when you look at Shun Skywalker has had almost 530 matches over the last 3 years.
Jesus.
Yeah. Whereas someone like Lady C, for example, is someone who just got injured in Stardom, has a neck injury and will be out until after the 10th. Her last 3 years, after saying be 101, 118, 129 is their show schedule case, 97, 101, 113.
Gotcha. So, and I don't know this, obviously. I don't know if you know this, but my understanding is that the Stardom injuries are top stars, like Yamato and Shun level type people. Is that true?
Right. Yeah. So remember in September, the injury bug that was hitting Ryu Fuda, Kaito Nagano, Tien, and all of that.
Boy, Fuda disappeared. Oh, holy shit. Sorry, but wow. Ryu Fuda was like a guy for a second. And boy, I thought he was coming back soon, and I guess not.
Dude, those kinds of surgeries with pens take a while to heal for your hands.
Boy, okay, all right. Sorry, injury bug in September.
But I had that thought too during the coverage this week about remember Ryu Fuda? It was right as Kaito Nagano returned. That popped in my head. But while all those kind of things were happening, and of course Minorita and this, those are people that, other than Minorita being a champion and Fuda being in a program, not necessarily things that hurt your bottom line as much. BB Hulk doesn't really matter for the company, in the greater scheme of things. When they go to Sapporo, he matters, but day in, day out is thing.
And I'm not even sure he matters there as much anymore. I'm very interested. Hulk's in big spots on these upcoming Sapporo shows, and I'm really curious to see what they do.
Yeah. So they lost Tom Nakano, their red belt champion, their top champion. They lost the person who was going to win the 5-star and the person that they were going to book to as the backup. They went out too. It's been murder basically on that roster. It is bad. It is legitimately bad.
And I asked that because we've been talking off air about some of these Stardom attendances. And again, I want to make it so abundantly transparent. I'm not doing this to rub salt in the wounds, but I'm so curious because, I hear all the time about these big Stardom shows, and then they did just over 1,000 fans in the big Osaka, and then they just did, which I thought was more damning because this is a market they're very competitive in with Dragongate and with New Japan, but they did 432 in the Nagoya Congress Center, and that those would be bad pandemic numbers for some companies. And again, it's no analysis other than, man, those numbers are really low. I'm trying to understand why that is because I don't follow the product. And if they lose top stars, they lose top stars. I get it. But the Stardom numbers outside of Corkin, they've had a few lately where I've opened it up. I've opened up the attendance and I've had to double check it because I think surely they couldn't have done that. And unfortunately for them, they have.
And it's something where I think we were talking about another number that was happening for New Japan, especially in that market. This is more and more of what we've been saying about the wrestling industry in Japan was not going to spring back as everyone was expected. And it's only gotten progressively kind of worse and worse over the last 6 months, it feels like.
I find the fact that Corkin is not feeling the need to progress past 1,400 tickets as a sellout to be really interesting. Just almost a year removed from any restrictions. Dragongate's doing 1,200, 1,300. New Japan can pack the place for a few shows here and there. Stardom gets close. All Japan's done great numbers all year, but the great number is 1,200 now, not 1,600. And I'm just continuously kind of waiting for the demand to increase, and it just never does. It's just where we're at in the industry now, and it's not good.
Yeah, and it's something where DDT 700 starting their King of KOD tournament. It's not just like us like picking like Stardom. Like it's something that when you look at the entire landscape, it's not very encouraging.
No, look, I harp on the Noah thing all the time where it's like we talk about schedules. Noah doesn't run shows. Like Noah's run like 90 shows this year, and most of them are in Tokyo. And I feel like no one is like as blown away by that as I am, where I'm just like, they're just never doing anything. I don't know how, if you're not like Go Shiozaki or Kaito Kiyomiya, who I guess, he's working New Japan to supply some dates now. I don't know how you're a No wrestler and you make a living, because Noah just doesn't run shows. Yeah,
and when they run shows, it's like Osaka, Kyoto. It's places that if you are a contracted Noah wrestler, okay, yeah, sure. But if you're someone like Shuji Kondo, you already work those places. And if you're someone that's a Shuji Kondo fan, you've already had options to see them and those places too.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. So that is everybody but Dragongate. Let's go back to this show real quick, because we got a bunch of Dragongate stuff I want to talk about.
Yeah, so the opener in Kunamoto was a unaffiliated versus Natural Vibes 8-man tag. Yamato, Don Fuji, Kagator, and Punch Tominaga representing the unaffiliateds versus KZ, Big Boss, Shimizu, Strong Machine J, and UT of Natural Vibes. Shimizu got the win with a machine killer into an aided Big Boss press onto Tominaga. When the Natural Vibe train started chugging towards the end against Old Punch, he was just completely steamrolled.
Very enjoyable opener. Like I said, if you approach this show like it's TV wrestling, I think you're going to be thoroughly delighted by what you see. And this was just a good way to start the show. I don't have any extended thoughts on these guys other than I enjoyed this match.
Yeah, Don Fuji was a delight, like being the TV character that he was. Like, yes. He broke up a pin by throwing a water bottle, and Kachi-san was like, "Man, really? Did you do that? Like, we can't have that."
That's that Tenru training coming into effect.
Yes, sir. After that, we had our first of two singles matches. Yuki Yoshioka defeating Jason Lee with the flashbang in 9:42. This was a tidy, hard-hitting sprint.
Oh God. I mean, this was a ton of fun. It was a good reminder. I remember like Rey de Parejas time this year, you and I were talking about how Jason Lee went from this kind of swanky technical wrestler, like really fast, just always on the right spot at the right time guy, to he is now humongous. And he now hits people really hard. That has become his thing this year. Jason Lee 2023 is like a totally different wrestler than Jason Lee 2022 and before. I think he's, obviously, I think he's still incredibly super talented. But this was kind of a zoom in on like, oh, I bet this match a year ago looks way different, because this was kind of these two guys slugging it out. And I don't think this match would have looked like that in November of 22.
Oh, not whatsoever. And especially November 2022, Yuki Yoshioka, Dreamgate champion. Like, this would have been like a 5-minute match, and Jason would have had like a maximum driver near fall, and that would have done it.
Yeah, no, very, very enjoyable stuff here. Again, one of these things, 9-minute match, you put this on American TV, I think people eat it up, and very fun stuff here.
A match where American TV would probably be going, gosh, what is that Jacky Funky Kamei guy? Like, what? Like, he really went for it there. He went up against Shun Skywalker, lost in 10:33 to a Boston Crab. Case, I went notebook on this. I adored this. It had a lot of Jacky Funky Kamei firing up belt spots, and really, to me at least, a highlight of both of their strengths, and the way that I really do feel like Shun Skywalker's sneaky best chemistry is with Big Match Jack.
I have a ton of thoughts on both of these guys. Do you want to start with Shun? Do you want to start with Jacky?
Let's talk about Big Match Jack. This was really his big performance over this stretch.
Yeah, he has had a very, very good 2023 as I, start to compile a list of SFM 50 guys, the 50 best wrestlers in the world, and I start doing match of the year stuff, and I start just, trying to remember all the things that I've consumed this year. I am continuously reminded that not only did Jacky Funky Kamei have a number of extremely high-level matches just this past month, the 8-man at Cork and Hall with D'Courage, you think about the things he did on house shows this year, the Rey de Parejas match with he and Jason versus Kikuta and Yoshioka. There was just a lot of high-level Kamei stuff that we've seen. And I think, possibly the biggest winner of these YouTube digests have been over the last 2 years. It's been Jacky Funky Kamei, because we see every show he's on, this guy is so good. I, for a very long time, including 2 weeks ago, have always compared him to Genki Horiguchi. I think he's the beating heart of this promotion. He's the guy that keeps the drum going, keeps the machine going. He's driving the truck forward. Whatever cliche you want to use, Kamei is just unapologetically and authentically Dragongate. And then I watched this match, which I was at 3 3/4 on. No knock whatsoever for going notebook on it from you. And it's like, no disrespect to Genki, who I love. Everybody knows that. This guy is like a combination of Susumu Yokosuka and Rey Mysterio Jr. Because I think it's funny you say that about Shun having his best chemistry with Kamei. The thing that is going to be so telling about Kamei is that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, he's going to have that Susumu, Rey, Bryan Danielson effect where we're going to look at the roster and we're going to go, oh, what's this person's best match? And there's a 99% chance it's going to involve Jacky Funky Kamei. Like, we're 4 years into his career, and this guy is so clearly one of the best, at worst, 25 wrestlers on earth, and he doesn't get the praise he deserves from the pundits that matter, and it's a damn shame. But, oh my God, was he good in this match.
And it's so interesting hearing you say that, because back in 2020, we kind of picked sides on the two rookies, and Kamei and SBK, and it was something where you saw a very clear path forward with SB Kento that's now never going to happen. Ugh. Or for it to happen, it's going to take some time. He's not going to be the youngest ever Dreamgate winner or Grand Slam winner, like we were thinking.
He is not.
No, we can fairly state that.
He might be the youngest G-Rex champion of all time. Oh, what a prestigious honor.
I mean, DTU Alto Impacto champion.
Yeah, does Riot Lucha have any titles? Yeah, they're huge fans of him in the office. Maybe Kento becomes the youngest Riot Lucha champion.
Right, but it was something where
go ahead. We were talking about Kento before we started recording it. It just bummed me out so much.
But we had Kamei where he was small. He was kind of scrawly. He was nicknamed Turtle Coon basically for the first year or so of his career because his name meant turtle. And he adapted it, and instead of blossoming immediately like Kento Kabune did, where Kento Kabune, by the end of 2020, the world felt like it was in the palm of his hand, and it was just, when does he want to grasp the stars, essentially? Well, Kamei was slow and steady, and you have now, 4 years in, someone who has understudied under who I would think would be the best educator's possible case for him to become this glue guy, this big match Jack, the everyone's best match, when you have someone who for 18 months was teaming with Genki Horiguchi, who still teams with KZ to this day. And for this kind of facet of the Dragon system, and especially in the looking forward to the next quarter century of it, we need to prepare ourselves for the reality that 10 years from now, we're probably going to be talking about what kid is going to be his understudy. And that is something that is so crystal clear to me what his future is in this really beautiful kind of way that this promotion is kind of generated for him, that he didn't get the dragon mask that Daya did, where he became the heir to the heir. He kind of had to scrawl and pick and just claw and get this role for himself. And it's really kind of fun to see.
It's very funny you say that, because I was also going to reference he and SB Kento and just, how they came into the promotion together. And I think your greatest win as an analyst is earmarking Kamei from the jump. I mean, you had him, and I say that sincerely. Like, I thought he was good. I didn't think he'd ever be this. This is maybe your biggest win as an analyst, is just understanding who Kamei could be. And it got me thinking, as we're 4 years into his career, he is, without a doubt, I think anybody that watches the promotion on a regular basis, somebody listening to us now, somebody that watches the YouTube uploads, watches, I would say, more than just the Cork and Hall show, or especially more than just the Big Five shows. They understand that Kamei matters to the day-to-day fabric of this promotion. But I started thinking about him after this Shun match, and with the year that he's had, where, we'll get to Shun's year in a second, because I want to talk about that. But, you have Shun and Kikuta and Yoshioka, and I think in ring, those have been the three best guys this year. And then I would have Kamei, given, the injuries to Diamante and the fact that Dragon Dia hasn't had the best year of his career. And, Strong Machine J is not quite there yet. Shimizu's been very good, but I don't know if Kamei or Shimizu has had the better year. The point is that he continues to thrive, and we continue to say, like, oh, Kamei's the best big match wrestler. Oh, Monte's best chemistries with Kamei. Oh, Shun's best chemistries with Kamei. I now have to wonder if Dragongate is actually severely underutilizing him. And if you go and look through his career, and it's perfect, because we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of his debut next month. We're a month away from it. In his career, he has had 11 title matches, and I'll go through them real quick. He's only had 2 Bravegate matches. Mike, do you know what his 2 Bravegate matches are?
Oh, they're both against SB Kento, first in Kobe Sambo Hall 2021 in October, and then they ran it back in Corkin that November.
Yep, yeah. It's that thing about that. His only 2 Bravegate matches are the mind-numbingly great, I should say, SB Kento Bravegate matches. You look at the Twin Gate matches. He's only had 3 Twin Gate matches in his career, the first of which was when he won the belts versus Shun and Diamante with Jason Lee last year at Kobe World. Their first defense, they lose the belts to Dia and Kikuta. And then this year, he was involved in that 3-way at Dangerous Gate, which didn't land the way I think anybody wanted it to. So 2 Brave Gate matches, 3 Twin Gate matches, didn't successfully defend the Twin Gate belts when he won them. And then he's had 6 Triangle Gate matches, including a run this year where I don't believe he had a successful defense. So he's had a number of those shots, but, Mike, off the top of your head, because I can't think of any, can you think of, like, the Jacky Funky Kamei Triangle Gate match?
There really isn't it?
Yeah. Look, I've got a notebook on a few. Like, there's one from February of this year that was great, but it's not the Twin Gate match at World last year, and it's not the Brave Gate matches. We don't think of him as this historically great Triangle Gate wrestler in the way that we might think of Doi that way. It's 11 title matches in 4 years. Last year in King of Gate, he wasn't in King of Gate 2020, wasn't in King of Gate 2021. Last year in King of Gate, he beats Yosuke Santa Maria in the first round, loses to Shuji Kondo in the second round. This year in King of Gate, loses to Yuki Yoshioka in the first round. And I'm not saying they should have done something different, because, that paved the way for the story they told with Shimizu, and it paved the way for Yoshioka versus Minoura and Gifu on that aforementioned Konomami Chikawa Homecoming show, which that whole show, it just makes me warm and fuzzy. I loved everything about that. But we have this guy who is maybe not your best wrestler on the roster, but is a tier 1 guy. I mean, I think he's in the conversation with Shun and Kikuta and whoever else you want to put in there. He's a guy.
If we had a draft with 2 or 3 other big Dragon System people, he's not getting out of the second round.
No, anybody that would disagree with that, I think their finger is just so off the pulse there. So at worst, you're talking about a second-tier wrestler, a guy who is very clearly over, and a guy who just matters in the context of this promotion. And I feel like they're doing themselves a disservice, because you and I, if, somebody came to us and said like, hey, I want to start watching Dragongate, who should I watch? Again, you and I would say Kamei, but it's not like we have all of these high profile matches we can point to. I'm like, well, there was a show in Okinawa that I would really recommend you take a look at. Like, let me show you this match from this hotel conference center. They are doing themselves such a disservice to not have Kamei in the Bravegate mix, to not have him really mattering in a King of Gate. Like, you would have to think King of Gate 2024, Kamei should go on a run. I'm not saying he should win. I'm not saying he should be Dreamgate champion, but he should go on a run. I mean, this is a guy who I think they're almost getting away with murder, because it's like he's so good that everybody forgets he really hasn't ever been a champion. Like, he's, he was a one-time Twin Gate champion, lost the belt's first defense. I think he's a two-time Dragongate champion. None of those reigns are really memorable. He's just so good. He keeps this promotion going, but he's not a champion. Like, he's not a top guy. He's not presented as anything other than like beating hard of the promotion, Jacky Funky Kamei. And I'm starting to think it's a mistake. I actually think they get more out of this guy just because he's so damn talented.
Yeah, and it's something where I think a little bit of it is age and size that hurts him almost, because he is someone on a short roster, one of the shortest guys on the roster, and that is a sticking point. And should that be a sticking point for at least the Bravegate division? No. But I think with how they are running with this current Bravegate division at this point, there has to be a logical endpoint soon where we'll talk about the Ishin and Hyo match that's coming up at Corkin in a little bit. But at this point, I don't necessarily see that as like the usual babyface heel, a heel turns face, immediately gets the belt there. I kind of see that the endpoint needs to be Ishin versus JFK at Final Gate.
It's interesting you bring up the size, because that's not something I ever think about with him anymore. Like, if they booked Kamei and Yoshioka, I guess, they did with Shun. It's like, I don't think Kamei looks illegitimate getting offense in on Shun, and I don't think Shun looks weak for taking offense against Kamei, and I'm not sure I would have said that in 2021. I think they would have had to work the match in a specific way, but Kamei is he's kind of earned that credence. Like, he's able to work through his size, use it to his advantage, and now you have an entire generation of guys younger than him. If this was a promotion where they don't churn out youth ever, like the dojo is just collecting cobwebs, I could buy like, oh, well, he's only 4 years in, think about like all the time he has left. But 4 years in Dragongate means something different. Ryoya Tanaka and Ryofuda, wherever he is, and Tien, all these guys are going to come through, and they're now competing for the spot that Kamei has. Kamei should be elevated and stay a step ahead of them. If you think about the guys throughout history, removing your obvious Dreamgate champions, take Shima out of the conversation, take Yamato out of the conversation, but think about like a Genki or a Susumu or an Eita, if you want to use his starting point as 2010. Think about where they were at 4 years into their career. Genki was El Numero Uno finalist, and Susumu was, starting to become in the mix for the UDG title. Think about Eita from 2010 to 2014. Like, by 2014, he's in the semi-main event of World as a Twin Gate champion, but I feel like T-Hawk and Eita were taken more seriously than any one team that Kamei's ever done, and I think that's probably a mistake.
Yeah, and it's something where I wonder, when we like look at where Kamei is at year 4, the fact that he was after the class of 2016, where the class of 2016 are now inheriting that kind of role, at the front of the cards, kind of in a way. Not that they're blocking, it's just that it's so recent kind of happening that it kind of, I said kind of 5 times that sentence, but it's restrictive, it's something where maybe just like trying to go ebbs and flows, getting people ready for this generation shift that's happened. It's just waiting like, okay, 6 months, a year from now, maybe. But at that point, you're looking at someone who's now 5 years in his career at that.
Kamei is greatly hurt by those around him, because he's not not a Reiwa guy. You know, he's not class of 2016, and he's not Minoura. He's not like Dai. Like, it feels like Daya and Kamei are of two totally different generations, even though they debuted only a year apart. But then you look at who's come after, and it's like, okay, well, Kamei and Kikuta, I mean, they were briefly a tag team, and that was cool when they first debuted, but Kamei's, for lack of a better term, his soulmate, it was SB Kento. And I think maybe if Kento had stuck around, and I started thinking earlier today, you know, he's almost been gone from Japan for 18 months. Like, the last time he wrestled in Dragongate was July of 2022, which is just nuts to think about. But perhaps had Kento stayed, got his head on right, not been such a dumbass, it would have really helped elevate Kamei, because they could have fought their way up the card, Bravegate, Twingate, maybe a Dreamgate, you know, maybe a super undersized Dreamgate program at some point. And I'm not saying that would have come this year. I just think now Kamei's, you know, he's sort of in no man's land. You know, Kabune's gone. Kikuta is so big that it aided him in his main event run, and he also, just by way of hurting his shoulder, had this sort of built-in story there. Sora Fujikawa, his classmate, gone. La Estrella, where the fuck is La Estrella, Mike? I can't find him with a search party. And then he certainly doesn't belong to the class of 2021 and beyond. Kamei, it's so weird. Like, he is so
it's
authentically...
like Shimizu.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's so authentically Dragongate, but he's a man on his own island, because he doesn't have peers in the same way that Ben does with Shun and Hyo and Yoshioka, and that Eita had even with T-Hawk and Maria to some degree, and that Yamato had with Tozawa and Shingo and Hulk and KZ. Like, Kamei is this historical oddity almost.
The wild thing is Kamei's like big contemporary at this point would be Daya Minoura, really.
And doesn't, like I said, like, I don't think of him like that.
No.
You know, I don't think of Kamei as having any sort of generational rivalry with Minoura or Daya. Like, and it's, you know, it's not the new kids. It's just it's very odd. Again, I almost wonder now, because you brought that up, like, if they should be leaning into Ishin, because Ishin has the upper hand. Ishin debuted after Kamei, but he won a Bravegate title sooner. That feels like a story that writes itself.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something where with Kamei also, I wonder with like trying to push it that they don't want to remind people of the thing they had with SPK, because the promos that SPK and the way that they framed it really tied him to him. Like I remember like the aspect of the promo saying like, remember back in the dojo, I was always on the top bunk and that's how it's always going to be.
Yeah.
Like that is something that will, at least for Kamei and Kabune, when that happened, it kind of just stitched them to each other in the way that, I mean, if we really want to go, it just pull out and just look at it from like a wide thing, it's not dissimilar to BB Hulk, where BB Hulk has been, for lack of better words, adrift for 5 years because Shingo left.
And imagine if Shingo would have left after their hair match. Like, if their hair match was Loser Leaves Town, 2011 would have been like, oh, what's Hulk gonna do now? And it's a credit to Kamei that we haven't really had that conversation, because he is just able to bounce from one thing to another, and he's always able to succeed while doing it. Whereas even like Hulk at his peak, I don't know if he would have been able to do that if Shingo left for New Japan and, again, 2010, 2011 instead of 2018. But yeah, maybe it's just forces beyond his control that have unfortunately impacted what has been a successful career. But I really started thinking about it of just like, there's more they can do with him. There's more to go. And I don't know if they're hesitant to. I don't know if they're just content with the work that he's doing, but it feels like we're at a point now where Kamei should be always in the Twin Gate mix. He should be always in the Brave Gate mix. He should, if he's not winning the Triangle Gate belts, he's wrestling for them on the next pay-per-view. He should be on that level now. And instead, when he's in a title scene, it's like, they're trying something with Kamei. And I feel like he's graduated beyond that now.
Well, I guess the big question then is it ready for the heel turn? Is that going to be the thing that pushes him into not being like the secondary person? Like, even in the tag team with him and Jason, I felt like Jason was the primary focus there, even though it was Kung Fu Masters. At least as a worker, is it time for the heel turn? when, especially after we've talked about how much of a strong babyface Kamei has been and how he's tutored under the greatest baby faces possible to inherit such a role. Like, are we at a point right now where he's 4 years in, he's been 4 years as a baby face? It's always been a big deal made that no member of Natural Vibes has turned on the group. Is it time for all caps Kamei, I guess?
I don't believe we're in the peak of Kamei's career, but I also think it would be horribly misguided to leave this era of what he's doing before you have to. And it, to me, and maybe this is where you disagree, the character doesn't feel stale. It feels like there's more he could do. And if I had the pencil, I would be in no rush to break up or alter Natural Vibes. So no, I don't want that to be the thing that elevates him. I think he's doing the work now that warrants an elevation. A heel turn is now like another thing you got to move parts around. You got to figure it out. He's got to nail the character. He has a fully fleshed out thing right now. I would rather reward that thing than change it up and see if he can succeed again at a new thing.
But then you would have the face turn. That's the thing. You do the heel turn.
But now you're talking about years off. You know, now you're talking about, okay, let's plot out a heel turn so he can turn face again. And I just that feels like, okay, now we're in the weeds even more. Now we're waiting on something that could be here right now. And I'm all for patience. I've preached it with like M3K, for instance, for the last 18 months. This feels like a thing where we can get to it. We can get to the fucking, for lack of a better term.
Fair enough. I know we have Shun Skywalker on our run sheet here. Do you want to talk about Shun here?
Yeah, I'll just do it real quick, which is just watching this Kamei match. You know, Shun's had such an odd second half of the year because he has the cage match and everything, I think, up through that made sense. And then he gets bounced in King of Gate. Luis Monte's not there. He has that weird second trip to America that didn't make a ton of impact. And so I think, you know, we all have such short memories now with the way we consume things. It's easy to forget, like, Shun Skywalker, top 10 wrestler in the world this year. It just feels like it's worth noting, like, hey, this guy has actually been phenomenal in 2023, and he's cooled off, I think, due to scheduling more than anything. But you watch the Kamei match, you watch the Ryo Tanaka match, which I would highly, highly recommend on YouTube. It's like, oh no, this guy is still locked in and the best wrestler in all of Dragongate.
Yeah, he was thriving in that Tanaka match. That was just nasty. That was just, at a certain point, him just deciding to be mean and powerbombing that kid. Yeah,
that was on the most recent upload. Yeah, so that was November 26th on YouTube. It's the opening match there. It's 5 minutes. It is worth going out of your way to see. I think, and we'll talk about Tanaka here in just a second, but what a huge week for Tanaka. This Shun match, I thought, was the highlight of it.
Yeah, no, it was the most fun thing, at least for him, on that week. Continuing down the Genki Horiguchi 20th anniversary exciting battle case, we had D'Courage versus Gold Class, Madoka Kikuta and Dragongate defeat Kota Minoura and Benkei with a hip attack added double cork in 10 minutes 34 seconds. Dragongate just pinned Benkei case. Do we think Benkei is out of the Final Gate picture?
Well, I'll answer your question with a question. How about that?
Fair enough. Shoot.
Are we concerned that as of the date we're recording, it's November 28th, and there was no clear direction whatsoever for Madoka Kikuta's Final Gate opponent?
Yeah, no, we have much more of direction on D'Courage's Twin Gates opponents, which they have requested it to be outsiders. So we have that, but we have more direction there. It's something where, at least with Kikuta, I just it is something like after the story cementing the with Shimizu after the 6 months there, I'm okay with how the scheduling was. If come Tuesday we don't have a direction, as Korakuen is on Tuesday after the Sapporo triple shot, that is when I am lighting up the flare gun.
Yeah, let me look at this Korakuen card real quick because I don't remember what he's booked to do. So on Korakuen on the 5th, next Tuesday, so a week from today, they don't have a full card for that, do they?
Nope. I think we're not getting one until Sunday, to be honest.
Okay, so in Hokkaido, it's D'Courage versus Vibes, KZ Shimizu UT Kamei. It is D'Courage versus Z-Brats on night 2, Skywalker, Kai, Ishin, Kato. So 2 different 4-on-4 D'Courage matches. And then night 3 he's in the opener. It's Kikuta, Yoshioka, and Daya versus Fuji, Susumu, and Kanda. Well, that tells us nothing.
No, that tells me that they're doing the D'Courage 8-man tags now, and that they have Benkei versus Ryoya Tanaka, because Tanaka's going to get the crap beat out of him.
God, what are they going to... This is like... Again, Kikuta's a guy who just should... He should have had a better run. He was dealt a very poor hand, but he didn't really rise to the occasion the way I would want a world champion to. But you just have this great Shimizu match, which is aided because you had 6 months of story there. And there's no follow-up. And you look at what he did, it's like, okay, so Korakuen, he was in the 8-man. That was about Ryoya Tanaka. I get it. That should have been the focus there. But now you have a string of like 12 house shows where... he's in good matches. Like, I like what he's doing, but it's not beneficial to filling a cold-ass building in Fukuoka in a month. I don't understand what they've done with him. This whole reign has just been booked so strange, and I think it's a disservice to him. I mean, look, if they do him versus Ben, like, all right, I'm into it. But I don't, as of November 28th, like, I'm not excited about that match. I couldn't possibly be.
And on the other side of it, there's not really... It's not like someone is off stage ready to like rush in. It does not feel like that when Kai comes back, it's going to be about Kai. Like it's not like that. It feels like that we're holding out for an injury time to be taken care of, right? Like
no, because my thought was just because he lost the belts, the belt, and just the year he's had, and it would kind of go against the story they told in 2022. But I think people would look past it. I think Kikuta versus Susumu could be a final game match, but also why? They should have been building to something, and maybe it is Ben, and maybe Daya just pins Ben, and they reference that in a promo, and we go on. But I don't get it. It feels like time wasted with him, and I understand you want to do things with Tanaka, and I get it, and I support that, but you can also... It's Dragongate. There's a lot of the audience can handle a lot of things. You can do 2 birds with 1 stone here, build up Tanaka and give Kikuta something to latch onto.
Yeah, it's something where I'm just really wondering what when we get to Final Gate, after we get past the case, I want us to sit down and book back how they got to Final Gate, because at this point I am completely shrug emoji. Like that's the weird thing. Like, we're entering the final month of the year, and my overall opinion of Madoka Kikuta at this point is basically a shrug.
It's odd. I mean, he'll probably end up with 25 4+ star matches for me this year, which is, it'll be as many as Ospreay has. Again, he'll be, to me, like a top 5 wrestler in the world this year, but he's had 2 big clunkers with the most eyeballs on him, and I don't know how to evaluate that. He's just had such an odd year, and the Yoshioka stuff, like at World, I thought that build sucked. I didn't think they did either of those guys any favors, but it's just, the whole thing is weird. I can't articulate it the way I want to. The whole thing is just very weird.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of where I kind of come down to it. Is it's just like until something is better offered or some direction I just don't know how I'm supposed to react to it. Yeah,
very much so.
The semi-main event of this Kunamoto, I'm not going to read Genki Horiguchi's homecoming show title once more, but it was Big Hug. Hyo Mante and Hyo teaming up against Ishin and Yoshiki Kato of Z-Brats. Z-Brats during this loop down to 3 with Kai being pulled on it. It was the Samson driver on Ishin, further building up the upcoming Bravegate match at Korakuen Hall. What are your thoughts of Big Hug after? I mean, we left basically the program with them forming 2 weeks in, kind of like their first real loop down. How are you feeling now about Luis Mante and Hyo now really as a face group?
I gotta say, one of my big things when it came to wanting for Hyo to turn face over the last, arguably a year, at the very least 6 months, was, I would say you got to turn him face just so you can turn him heel again. And I think that's true, but I am enjoying the early stages of this Hyo face turn way more than I thought I would. I mean, this has just been, it's been a delight. This team is over. I think they did their best work here. They made a lot of the YouTube uploads against Natural Vibes. I didn't love any of the Vibes matches. I thought this was really, really good, though, because there was built-in heat there. The match just made a little bit more sense. But I like what these guys are doing. I am into this team. I hope they have a huge match, a tag match at the second Korakuen in December. I hope they have a huge match together at Final Gate. Which is what a joy this has become.
I think for Hyo, especially now as a babyface, I was really kind of impressed.
He's electric in a way that, like, you and I used to get shit for how much, like, we were like the only Hyo fans on the planet. This was 5-6 years ago.
One.
No, you absolutely were. You absolutely were.
Unintentionally, this is the Mike Spears Short King Victory Lap show. Like, Kamei,
yeah, it's like Shima sees like a wrestler of color with abs, and it's like, well, I'm gonna book that guy to be world champion. And Mike is like, oh, this 5'4" kind of pudgy wrestler, that's my guy.
And it works out.
You did it with Kamei, you did it with Hyo.
well, it started with Tozawa.
That's right.
So I mean, it's just following in that heritage. It's something where when you looked at where Hyo was in Mochizuki Dojo, especially in that second rookie phase, he was not a very flashy wrestler, other than he has very good handsprings. Like, yes. That was always the thing, was the handsprings and stunners. My big takeaway from this last few weeks are the young guys are now obsessed with doing stunners out of nowhere. Like that, like to an amount where I'm like, guys, you do know that you're coming off the top rope right on your tailbone to do that cutter. Hyo. Like, is that something really what we're going to do? But now they're obsessed with Randy Orton. Who knows? But it's something where he was so fucking over, Case.
Yeah.
And that was always the thing about him in 2018, 2019, was out of the class of 2016 guys, and about the Mochizuki Dojo guys, he was the one getting the crowd calls. He was the one that already attached us. And I think with his limitations and with this, he is kind of getting the best version of himself right here, at least as a babyface wrestler. And with the chemistry that he has with Mante, and less in this match against Ishin and Kato, but more so on the loop. I'm trying to pull up the exact one where this happened. Okay, this was from the Okinawa show, them versus Strong Machine J and Jason Lee. This was Nagasaki on the 21st. Nagasaki show. They do this. The finish is basically Hyo does his stunner, and that slings someone into Mante doing a Hurricane Rana hold, and it flows, it works, and it is something where you know what I'm most excited about for Hyo. I'm hoping for on this Korakuen show.
What's that?
What is babyface Hyo going to look like? Because he's still having to wear all the Z-Brats gear.
Yeah,
like. Is he going? I kind of hope he does the full shorts with the suspenders. I think he's going to finally have to show off the legs for one.
I'm all for that. To your point about him being so over, it's like, you got to remember, this guy turned heel in 2019. He was a heel pre-pandemic and then all through that era. And so, if you're a Hyo guy, Hyo girl, you've waited a long time for this opportunity. You've waited and waited and waited, and I don't think they could have executed it any better than what they're doing now. So it is a great sort of long-term patience that paid off in all the right ways here. I love this first act of his babyface run, and I think as it goes on, they'll get into a unit. I think he'll slip down the pecking order a little bit. He'll eventually turn heel, and I think this will be his career. He is a guy that no matter if he's turning face or if he's turning heel, the afterglow of his turns, I think, are going to be really, really special. You know, you look at somebody like Ishin, he turned heel, and it was like, all right, like it's going to take him a second to figure out what he wants to be, and part of that is just age and experience. But I think that's who he is, and I think Hyo is a guy who, when he gets that fresh coat of paint, you always go, oh man, this is something special. It was that way when he turned heel, and it was that way, this time around when he turned face, and the next time he turns heel, I think it'll be the same story.
Every time he does a little change,
just a little fun change. It's always enjoyable.
Mr. Brain, everything was a blast. He was that was like the most fun thing. When he decided to be the architect of the destruction of the Torimon generation, tremendous.
Outstanding.
One of my favorite things from Hyo during the YouTube uploads, I forget which one. And if you're someone who just tries to steamroll, try to watch all the wrestling stuff, you're probably fast forwarding through the interviews and the promos and GM Ryo Saito's address at the end of every single one, because most of the times Ryo Saito is finding a wrestler and going like, oh, we just finished up the show here. On one of the ones, we got to see one of those unique just facets of Dragon System kind of lore in a way, and not lore in the way that lore is overused. Case, what is tradition for Dragongate touring in the heel units?
They don't sign autographs,
and they don't set up the ring.
Yeah,
they don't set up or break down the ring. So during one of these, and I think this was Kaito Nagano's homecoming in Fukuoka that this happened to, he's going around talking to like Benkei, and then he stops by and he sees Hyo breaking down the ring, and Hyo is like laughing about this, and it's very clear that it's like, oh yeah, no, I haven't done this in a long time. And GM Ryo Saito sees that he's wearing his Z-Brats tracksuit, and he's like, I don't like that. You need to get yourself a Dragongate tracksuit right now. It's like, yeah, no, haha, I know. And it was just one of those things that, like, when that jogged me, I was like, oh yeah, he hasn't done that for 4 years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it was just one of those like fun things that if you're someone who just fast forwards through the YouTube uploads, you probably do not notice that. But that was our kind of breakdown of the Akunamoto show from November 23rd. This was, again, the Genki Horiguchi 25th anniversary exciting battle. But that was not all that was happening. We kind of avoided talking about this young man up to this point, but one of the big stars, I feel like, over the last 2 weeks has been Ryoya Tanaka making this big step after a Gate of Destiny, becoming the 4th member of D'Courage. We got to see on Cork and on the 9th kind of the first time of this 4-man group. And really, this is now 2 weeks later. Now we've had more loops. We've had a lot more performances. And we've had a lot of Tanaka singles matches, Case. And I have to say, Ryoya Tanaka, I love what they're doing with him. Like, he has really taken that brass ring and that next step, getting the right way. Like, if you are a Dragongate wrestler, a young wrestler, and you're looking at the unit landscape, you want to get into D'Courage. You want to get into that group. It's like the most advantageous one, really, at this point. But Ryoya Tanaka, I feel like he's just taken the bull by the horns and it has been really fun in this role so far.
It's so strange that he wasn't on Genki's homecoming show, because on all the YouTube uploads, he felt like the main character. You know, you have the Okinawa match, the 8-man that was Vibes versus D'Courage, essentially a rematch of what they did in Corkin. Thought it was very, very good. Went 3 3/4 on that. You have him in a singles match versus Yamato. That was on
Yamaguchi on the 24th.
Yes, you have him versus Kato on the 22nd. You have him versus Yamato on the 24th, and then you have him versus Shun on the 26th. You have these highlighted Tanaka matches, and I kind of thought he looked awesome in every single one of them. Like, I am so into Tanaka right now.
He is just a white bread baby face.
Yeah.
And it is so fun to see.
It's simplistic. You know exactly what he is as soon as the bell rings.
And he's really kind of added to his arsenal. His proclivity to just do stunners is wild. And I've really become impressed with the way that, especially in the 8-man in Okinawa, I feel like he's becoming more and more a part of this unit, and they aren't like immediately showing that he gels immediately. and that's been a lot of fun. But the person that I've really enjoyed against him was Strong Machine J. Strong Machine J and that Okinawa 8-man. I was 3.25 or 3.5 on that one. I love the 11-22 match, him versus Kato. Have not really talked about Yoshiki Kato yet, Case. Man, this is a man who was made to be a bad guy.
Yep. Yeah. Very.
I can immediately.
To keep it short, I'm just very into what Kato is doing as well.
Yeah. Well, it was very clear that he was going to be an amazing heel. He has been an absolute blast. Well, which one was your favorite Tanaka performance over the last week?
I liked the Shun match the most, just because I like the dynamics there. I like that they brawled all around the little room they were in. I like when they do that with the handheld cameras on the house shows. And then I thought the finish with Shun really just kind of getting sick of the guy and, not hitting him with an SSW, not hitting him with a blaster, but just sort of planting him into the mat and pinning him. I thought that was super entertaining. Yeah,
it was something where you got to see a little bit of a different side of Tanaka throughout these 3 matches. Just touching on the Yamato one, that one was a lot more Yamato turning cranky, getting mouth blood, and just destroying him with a Galleria at the end of it. Like, that was one of the more brutal Gallerias I've seen in a long time.
It was
nasty. That was rough. And the other big occurrence during this loop is the return of one Kaito Nagano at his homecoming show in Fukuoka. He teams with Dragongate and Yamato versus Z-Brats, Shun, Ishin, and Kato. He remains on the loop the next day. They remain in Fukuoka, but outside of his hometown. That time he's teaming with Dragon Kid versus Genki and Kagetora. Interesting to see him back. His shoulder still heavily taped up. What were your thoughts on his return from the DL?
I thought he looked awesome in his comeback match. It was kind of one of those deals where, you never know, especially with a wrestler like that, weird injury, small guy, small frame. You never really know what you're going to get with that initial return. And I think with him, and this is, purely me editorializing and reading into things, but if I were Nagano, I'd kind of be scared shitless because, okay, Kato took a leap and then Tanaka took, a huge leap. All of a sudden, a guy like Nagano who was leading the pack of rookies for a while, he's fallen behind. And if I were him, I'd be upping my game. And that's exactly what he did there.
And it's something where he's upping his game and in a way where he's not necessarily flashy. As someone who kind of was let down a little bit by Nagano after his really hot end of 2022 and rookie tag in early 2023, he was smooth, he was crisp, and it was really what I kind of wanted to see out of him. And he got a big kick out in his return match, and the finish was a Bible on Ishin, I believe, on that. But it was something where he got a kick out of the Kamada chokeslam, and that felt like something for him, especially in the front of his hometown.
Does he end up with Mante and Hyo, you think?
I feel like he does make sense there, because I felt like D'Courage was the place, but now it's very clearly, Tanaka is the guy. He's the dude there.
I'd love to know if it was supposed to be Nagano instead of Tanaka. I mean, Tanaka's such a, you see it and you go, oh, that makes sense. I would just love to know if it was originally supposed to be Nagano.
Right, yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming down to with that. When I look at those 3, I kind of want to vet presence. You really kind of want to have, you can't really pull Yamato over there, and Dragon Kid kind of could fit with that bill, but it's that threesome there still feels like it is a little lacking in a way for a unit, at least.
Yeah, I think that's, the problem is okay, so what do you do? Would you throw Kagetora in there too? That doesn't really excite anybody. I do want to see Mante Nagano double team moves. So I'm going to support that cause just because I like the idea of that.
Yeah, because the big Space World GIF was on Mante, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, boy, just imagine what he can do as a teammate, let alone his opponent.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked Nagano's back. I don't believe he's not on the Hokkaido shows, is he?
Let me pull that up there.
I don't think he normally makes that trip anyways.
It's a peculiar kind of Hokkaido lineup, I feel like. It is not...
Yeah, he's not on these shows, but Tanaka is and Kato is, so... hopefully Nagano's back on Cork and he crushes it there because it was nice to have him back.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And any other big YouTube notes you wanted to touch on? I feel like we touched on nearly all of the big stuff. There was the Punch Tominaga quotient was a little bit less than I expected, honestly.
Yeah, when this comes out, I'll throw in the Open the Voice Gate channel on the Discord. I will throw out a list of written YouTube recommendations from this past week because there were just so many shows. I'll write them down, but no, it was all in all super enjoyable.
Absolutely. And that's not the only stuff that is happening in the greater Dragon system this week, as it kind of snuck up on us, Case. But this Saturday in the veritable hotbed of wrestling of Clive, Iowa, Wrestling Revolver has a first time ever dream match as Masaki Mochizuki, for the first time in 10 years, returns to the United States to face Speedball Mike Bailey. This snuck up on me. It was something that we knew, but it was something that I was like, oh, no, December is Friday. Like, it's now. And it's exciting, though, to see him there. He only has 2 matches currently on this tour. It's this and the Brian Keith match. I don't have the date on.
That's on Sunday.
That's on Sunday. So he has these 2 shows and nothing announced so far.
Yeah, we heard
months ago.
We heard a number, and I would assume it's real. I trust who I heard it from, but we heard a number of what it cost to book Mochizuki, and it's certainly not in everybody's budget. I talked to a promoter who was very into the idea of booking Mochizuki, and then I told them the number, and they went, well, that's not going to happen. And then I talked to another promoter. I didn't tell you this story. I talked to another promoter who was, this is a quote. He's like, look, I fucking love Mochizuki. My audience does not care about this man. I am not putting him on my show unless it's cheap. And then I told him the price. He went, nope, I can't do it. So he's demanding a certain amount of money that I would assume is similar to maybe what it costs, and I don't know this to be true. I'm just assuming here, to maybe like what a Minoru Suzuki would cost to get on a show. And as much as it might disappoint us, he just doesn't have the cachet that somebody like that would have. So, he's doing Wrestling Revolver against Speedball. He's doing West Coast Pro against Brian Keith. The good news is I do think actual human beings watch West Coast Pro. So if he kills it there, and I expect him to, I expect a little bit of buzz to come from that, which is really nice. And we'll see what happens. I wish he was working more. I wish he was working at Chicago, but it just did not work out that way.
Yeah, I was hoping he was going to get a date around here. Still think he is being based in Texas, so there's a possibility of that.
That's my understanding. Right.
Yeah, but we'll probably over the next few weeks we'll see what Mochi gets up to. I kind of feel like he's gonna be a little lonely. He's not gonna have his dog around.
No dog and no kid.
No dog or no kid. Masaki Mochizuki left without any entanglements in the United States for a month. That's cool.
No, but he's in the perfect 2 matches so far. Speedball and Brian Keith. I mean, other than selfishly, I'd want to see him versus Fred Yehi just because I like Yehi as a wrestler so much. These are the 2 matches he should be in. So I hope they work out. I'm looking forward to watching them.
Yeah, outside of these 2 guys, especially if where like the indies are, like I'd like to see Mochizuki versus Kevin Ku. I feel like that would be a very interesting match, but I can't see that match happening anywhere outside of Deadlock Pro, basically.
Yeah, like a Kevin Ku or a Kevin Blackwood, I'd be into both of those. But it's again, we have an idea of what he's charging. And it's like, I can see why promoter is not like, well, shit, let me do Mochi versus Kevin Blackwood. Right. I get it.
It is something where I respect what Mochizuki is charging. And I respect why the bookers are saying not for us at that price.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I talked to somebody. I'll tell you who it was off air. Who's a big Mochizuki fan, and then they looked at their promotion and they looked at the cost and they went, man, it's got to be a no for me, brother.
Sadly. Well, Case, anything else you want to touch on before we got out of here this week?
No, I've covered everything. I'm good.
Yep. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Open the Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. We're going to have a little bit of a shakeup for next week. We're going to leave that a little bit of a surprise, though, Case. We'll let it be a surprise until it drops into people's podcast feed. But you can follow us on Twitter, X at Open VoiceGate. Cases at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening to Open VoiceGate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.